Hi guys, we're group 2 and we're going to be teaching you a lesson over ancient Greece. We would like to begin with a video that we've linked in the discussion board titled Crash Course Ancient Greece. So please pause the video, go watch that video, and then come back to this video when you're done. Do that now.
Okay. So, hopefully you watched that video. Obviously, we will be doing ancient Greece, and we are going to be combining math and a little bit of English, quite a bit of English into it. And yeah, I'm going to pass it over to Teacher Mia.
Okay, awesome. So, I have another video. Do we need to adjust this? Okay. And this is just to put us into context of mathematics in Greece at this time period. So I want you to open the video, just watch the first minute, just for some background, and then come back when you're done. But, okay, so they mentioned Pythagoras, so he was one of the ancient mathematicians that we're going to be focusing on right now, and thinking specifically about the Pythagorean theorem. So, if you open the textbook, I linked it, and it's under DGTE. And there's a spot called History Connection where you can learn more about him. And yeah, that's what we're going to be focusing on. So for the Pythagorean theorem, we need to know about right triangles. So I want you to think about what you already know about right triangles. Some things that came to mind for me were the hypotenuse, 90 degrees, the legs. Colin? Thank you. It would help if we had a whiteboard, but here's a picture that I drew. The hypotenuse is the one opposite of the right angle, and then C and D would be the two legs. And then Pythagorean theorem would be a squared, which is our hypotenuse, equals the sum of the two sides squared, so a squared equals b squared plus c squared. And you're going to go more in depth with this, looking at our text as far as proofs, practice problems, and real-life application. So, let's see. So we're going to start off with some notes. So if you want to pause this video and go through the handout called Guided Notes, and then when you're finished, come back here and we'll keep working. So there's that.
Yes.
Okay, so you went through the guided notes, you know some of the vocabulary, you know more about the equation, you've done a few practice problems, and now we're going to do a real-life application. So you'll have to go to another document, and it's called Independent Practice. And I want you to just try number 1, draw a picture that helps me, and then I'll come back and we'll talk through it together. That's a little starting and stopping.
That's really going to do it.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, so looking at number 1. It says, a 13-foot ladder is resting against a house. The base of the ladder is 5 feet from the base of the wall. How high up the wall does the ladder reach? First step is to draw the diagram. So here is my picture. Here's my ladder. It's 5 feet from the wall, and we know that for the Pythagorean theorem, it has to be a right triangle, and we know that the ground is perpendicular to the wall, so there's our right triangle. And the ladder is going to be at the hypotenuse in this case. So setting up our equation, we do the two legs, x squared plus 5 squared equals 13 squared. And then solving for x, we get x is equal to 7. So we know that this distance right here is 7 feet, so the ladder is 7 feet high. Cool. Okay, so for the rest of the independent practice, I'd like you guys to finish this worksheet, so that's just 3 more problems, not that hard. And then the last thing that we're going to the last thing is that there's going to be a quiz next Wednesday going over what we know about the Pythagorean theorem. So yeah, be ready for that. Done.
Yay!
All right.
Math is cool.
I love math. Okay, moving on to the language arts portion. So there's going to be another link, and it's titled probably Percy Jackson handout. So go ahead and open that up, get a print of it, whatever you need to do. And below that, it will say probably something like ancient Greece video or God video,
Yes.
something like that.
God video.
It'll be right below the handout. But while you watch the video, we want you to fill out the first two columns of the handout. So the first column is titled God. In the video, it'll just go through a bunch of gods. Write 3 random gods that you see. It doesn't have to be the first 3. It could just be any of them. So hopefully that makes sense. And then in the second column, it will say symbol. And in the video, it will give you symbols that are associated with those gods. So just copy down those symbols that the video tells you. And that'll be a nice pre-reading practice for you guys before you get into the bulk of this lesson. So go ahead and do that. Pause this video and come back.
Nice. Okay, so, wow. So, as a little introduction into Greek mythology, we're going to do a little mini lecture. And for those of you who are confused and can't find the video, it's linked here. So when you look, if you want to follow along with my PowerPoint, first slide of the PowerPoint has the video. Please don't bring it closer. Oh, okay.
Oh,
great. It's fine. Okay. So, what is a myth? A myth isn't strictly limited to Greek mythology. So, a myth is any sort of story that's going to answer questions of existence in a social setting, in the natural world, and describe traditions of a culture. So, this is going to be a key part of a nation's culture. We'll see myths from Native America, we'll see myths from Greece, and they often relate to religion. So one of the key parts that I've listed as themes of Greek mythology is the gods of Olympus, and this ties in with Greek religion. 2 other key themes of Greek myths are monsters and heroes. So we're going to start thinking about that as we look at some famous Greek myths. So surely you guys have heard of Medusa, the woman with snake hair. She is a monster. Which is one of the themes of Greek myths. We also know of the Minotaur, the story of the labyrinth with the Minotaur in the middle. Narcissus, which is a Greek character who is obsessed with himself, which is where we get the word narcissistic, or a narcissist. Midas, everything he touches turns to gold, this little picture that's linked. And then Pegasus, the winged horse. These are some famous characters or Greek myths. And then, of course, as Colin kind of introduced us to already, and we watched a video on this, gods are really, really important, especially in myths as it relates to Percy Jackson. Percy Jackson talks to us about 3, the big 3, which are Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. They're kind of like the 3 original gods. They're brothers. Zeus is the king of all the gods. He's the god of the sky. We know him to be represented with a thunderbolt. Poseidon is the god of the sea. He's often represented with like sea creatures, waves, and then Hades is the god of the underworld. Some other really common gods that we see in Percy Jackson are Artemis, who's the goddess of the moon and the hunt, Athena, who's the goddess of wisdom and war, and she's represented by this owl, Apollo, who represents music, arts, medicine, the sun, and archery. Hermes is the god who relates back to the winged shoes. He's the god of travelers, merchants, thieves, and roadways. Ares, who's going to come up again later, is the god of war, and we've represented him here with some weaponry. And then Dionysus is the god of wine, who we've represented with grapes. So clearly, gods are really important to Greek myths, and what we're going to be doing is reading for references to famous myths, Greek gods, and these symbols that we've seen. So when we're reading Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, those are some things to keep in mind. Now Colin is going to lead us through a modeling exercise. And we get to apply that with our text.
So another link. Go to Percy Jackson excerpt, open that up.
It's here. It's easy. You can do it.
Okay.
It's right here on mine.
I'm going to turn this around. But just so you guys see.
It's very short.
Yeah. All right,
Great.
Scroll down to where it says the biker looked at me. It's the first sentence of a new paragraph. It's just like a couple scrolls down, so go ahead and find that. Okay, hopefully you found that by now. I'm going to kind of show you what we want you to do when you read this book, which is, like she said, just kind of relating it to Greek mythology and the idea of gods and goddesses and such. Okay, let's begin. The biker looked at me. I couldn't see his eyes behind the red shades, but bad feelings started boiling in my stomach. Anger, resentment, bitterness. I wanted to hit a wall. Okay, so we kind of have some emotions. We can kind of tell that something is influencing whoever the first person is, which is Percy Jackson. But there is some power over him right now, and it's probably something to do with gods. I wanted to pick a fight with somebody. Who did this guy think he was? He gave me a wicked grin. So you're old seaweeds, kid, huh? Notice how little grammar, seaweed is capitalized, so it's a name. And who is kind of associated with seaweed? Poseidon. So, connection. Seaweed, Poseidon, getting that in there. I should have been surprised or scared, but instead I felt like I was looking at my stepdad, Gabe. I wanted to rip this guy's head off. What's it to you? Annabeth's eyes flashed me a warning. Percy, this is... The biker raised his hand. It's okay, he said. I don't mind a little attitude, as long as you remember who's the boss. You know who I am, little cousin? Then it struck me why this guy looked familiar. He had the same vicious sneer as some of the kids at Camp Half-Blood, the ones from Cabin 5. You're Clarice's dad, I said. Ares, god of war. So that is an obvious reference. We know Ares is a Greek god, and he's the god of war. Ares grinned and took off his shades. Whereas I should have been, there was only fire, empty sockets glowing with miniature nuclear explosions. That is an interesting way to describe him. How do you pronounce his name? Reardon?
Yeah.
Reardon took that liberty of personifying Ares that way, so that's something to note. That's right, Punk, I heard you broke Clarice's spear. And as we learned that Ares kind of had symbols of weapons because he's the god of war. So a spear matches him, and we know with that connection as well. So we'll stop there, and that's kind of what we want you to do while you read the book.
Yeah. Awesome. So as Colin said, and Colin illustrated a really nice way to read the book, we want you to continue reading like that. We're obviously assuming that you've been reading the book right now, and hopefully none of this was a spoiler to you. And we want you to have the book finished by December 1st. Obviously, for college students watching, if you haven't read the book, don't worry. We don't expect you to read a whole book. We've linked to the Shmoop, if that's going to help you with like any of our activities. It outlines the plot pretty easily. If you're like okay to read bullet points, you should be just fine. But yes, December 1st. We're going to do a little bit of guided practice and then set you loose to do some independent work. But I'd love for you to pull back out that document that Colin had us start in the beginning, which is the chart with Greek gods, and it looks like...
The one you used for the video.
Sweet. So we've now been filling this out. You guys have done some independently. We're going to look over one together. So in the first column, let's assume we filled out Ares, because that's just who we talked about. The second column asks us to fill out symbols that represent the god. So we might say a spear, armor, something from the book, a motorcycle, something that represents the god. You can draw it if you're a more visual person. And now the thing that we're going to work on together is a quote of the physical attributes, personality, or something to do with the god from our reading. So this is something that I want you guys to have in mind while you're reading the book independently. Have this worksheet out, and as you see the gods that you've listed come up, pull a little quote from your text to put here and look back on when we have a final prompt. So for Ares, we might pull directly from Colin's excerpt and say, oh, there were empty sockets glowing with miniature nuclear explosions as a quote about Ares. We might say that he had a wicked grin, or that Percy, when he saw him, his bad feelings started boiling in his stomach. All of these are things that directly relate back to the text and describe a god for us. So that's what you're looking for. Independently, I want you guys, like I said, to keep working on that while you read. if you want to pause your video now and fill it out for the ones that you have, if you have some quotes in mind, feel free to do that. But if not, go ahead and fill it out as you read and get some good quotes.
Okay. And that should finish up the actual reading of the book. And when you are done with the book, we are going to take a lovely field trip to an art museum. Don't know where yet, but we'll find out. Maybe somewhere that's free. So, another link. It should be the very last link. It says Venn diagram. Pull that up. Have that handy.
It looks like this.
Yes.
You can see it.
So it says book portrayal and museum portrayal. While you're at the museum, look around for Greek gods and goddesses, kind of sculptures, paintings, artifacts, anything to do with them. So what you're going to do is compare and contrast, like I just said, the portrayal of those gods from the book and the museum. So we're using Aries, so we'll use him again. For the book, you might say in the book side, he is a biker. He has a lot of images of fire with him. And in the museum side, it could say he is very buff or muscular. He has a big beard, maybe. He's riding some kind of animal, something like that. But in the middle, you could say, I don't know, maybe that he has some weapon with him. Because I believe he has a weapon in the book as well. So yeah, that's just like a regular Venn diagram you would do. Look for those similarities and differences while you're at the museum.
Yes. And while you're also at the museum, we're going to all have a Q&A session with the museum curator who's in charge of the Ancient Greek exhibit. So this will be someone that knows all about the ancient Greek statues, paintings, any artifacts that are there, and can be a resource to you if you have any questions about this time period or the book. And Mia talked to us about Pythagoras. You can ask the curator about Pythagoras. You can ask them about the Greek gods. You can ask them about myths. We would love for you to come prepared with questions that you've written on your Venn diagram sheet, maybe one or two, so that we can have some good conversation and be respectful towards that curator. We wrote some notes down. It'd be cool if you asked about themes from the book, the gods, symbols that relate to gods, or characters. And then after that, once the curator has kind of said goodbye, we're going to step aside as a class and have a discussion about how Reardon describes the gods in Lightning Thief versus what we saw in the museum. So we're going to use Colin's Venn diagram that she made, and then we're also going to use that chart where we pulled evidence from the sheet, and we're going to kind of share what we saw, share what we think. Poseidon in the book is wearing a Hawaiian shirt. Poseidon in the museum likely is not. So why did these artists choose to depict their characters like this? What does it tell us about the time period, and what does it tell us about Greek myths in general? So we're going to have a big class discussion about that, referring back to our handouts.
All right, and we're going to talk about the assessments that are later on in this unit. So
Come back up. I'm going to
review
mine up on
yes.
here.
Hello again. Okay, so I forgot to mention earlier, but the independent practice, the problems 2 through 4 are going to be due next Wednesday. And that's the 28th.
Yes.
The 28th. And then I mentioned that we're going to have a quiz over Pythagorean theorem and just that vocabulary and stuff, and that's going to be also on the 28th.
Yay!
What is that?
No. And then for your English assessment, which we're not actually expecting you to write a paper, but this is like
Hypothetical.
our assessment. For your English assessment, you're going to write a 2 to 3 page paper using evidence that you've pulled from the text, what you've learned from Mia, what you've learned from me and Colin, surrounding mythology and Greek gods. And on the back of your paper, you're going to create and solve your own Pythagorean theorem equation relating to the story that you make. Wow! So you have 2 prompts to choose from for your paper. One prompt, you can create a short story in which you create your own Greek god. We want you to share their powers, their physical attributes, what they do, what kind of adventures they go on, and why they matter among the gods. So if we were writing a story about Zeus, we would tell you that he's the king of the gods, that he rules the sky, that he's muscular, he has a beard, and he's married to Hera, and that he reigns over all of Earth, all of the other gods. So we want to hear about what we see, our sensory details, and also why it's important. Your other option for a prompt is to create a myth explaining a natural occurrence, like snow or rain or a volcano. So, straight from Greek mythology, we are told that lightning occurs because Zeus is angry. Colin said she might write a story about snow being from a god crying. So we want you to be creative with this, have fun with this, but also think back to what you've learned about gods, how they're pictured, why they're important, and use that in your final paper.
Yep, and like you said, it's creative, so be creative with it. We'll give a reminder for all the due dates in the discussion board right under this video. So the book, like she said, finish it the 1st of December, so that gives you an extra day to fill out the handouts if you need to, which we'll be doing the 2nd. And then after that, there's nothing really you need to turn in, but it was just a heads up for what the assessment will be, what you will do at the museum, etc. The math quiz and homework is the 28th. And all the links should be under the due dates in order as we're going along in this video, but we'll also properly name them and refer to them as we did.
Yay! Let us know if you have any questions under the discussion board.
Thanks!
Thanks!